We're going to go ahead and get started. It's a little tinny. Sorry. Thank you, John. Appreciate that. Yeah. So hey, thank you all for coming. My name's Nate. I run Studio 45, and welcome to a Hardware Collective event. We're focused on the built environment today, but if you're not familiar with Hardware Collective, it's a partnership between Studio 45, where you are now, and we'll give tours later tonight if you're interested in seeing more of the space. I'll talk about it in a bit. Port Labs, my partner Kyle, who's in the back right there, you want to wave, Kyle, runs Port Labs, beautiful space in Oakland. Circuit Launch, which many people know, another amazing co-working space focused on robotics in Oakland, and Silicon Valley in Your Pocket, which is this great platform, really gearing towards entrepreneurs that aren't in Silicon Valley, but helping them learn the ropes for, pitching VCs, assembling pitch decks, all those things. And they platformized it all. So you as a founder can sign up and kind of go through a whole process to build up all these resources and go to investors. So thank you all for coming. We do these events monthly. So we'll be doing another one a month from now in September. And then in October, we're going to be launching a new funding vehicle that Silicon Valley in Your Pocket has put together specifically for hardware, raising money for hardware startups. So keep an eye out for information about that in October. So Studio 45, we're a clubhouse for professionals that make physical products. We work with engineers, entrepreneurs, artists, really anyone that needs access to tooling like a wood shop or 3D printers like we have upstairs, plenty of space to make a mess, but we also have offices and areas to do your knowledge work. So really, if you're building a business that makes physical products, we'd love to be your home. Come talk to me afterwards. You can scan this QR code to get more information. And as I said, we'll be giving tours later tonight if you want to see more of the space. Outside of Studio 45, I run a freelancing network called Informal. We've got 300 members all over the world that specialize in commercializing physical products. Engineers, designers, supply chain people, branding experts, you name it. If you need an expert to help launch your physical product or scale your business, we can help pair you with the individuals or assemble a whole team. Again, scan the QR code if you want more information, and feel free to ask me questions if you have any. So we have 3 amazing speakers today. Alex from an amazing company called Urban Machines that's involved in reclaiming wood for construction. He's going to have a ton to talk about there. Miranda from Tesla, focusing on the electrification of homes and battery storage in homes. And then Dan from Raise, which is a really awesome venture capital fund and also commercial real estate and helping companies find offices, and they've developed this WorkplaceOS for tracking utilization and using technology to better understand spaces. So it should be a really awesome conversation I'm looking forward to. And without further ado, Alex, you want to talk about Urban Machine?
I love it.
So you got this clicker, press down to progress forward.
All right, let's give it a test. Sweet. Hello, thank you so much for having me. And there we go. I'm Alex Steele. I'm a co-founder at Urban Machine, and I'm on the software side. So anything here that you have technical hardware questions about, I can lie about. So I love what I do. Urban Machine is this crazy, wild idea, so very passionate about this. So Urban Machine, when we started out about 1.5 years ago, we were looking at the lumber market and wondering, why is all this wood from demolitions getting thrown into the landfill? Right? What's going on here? By our calculations, it's something around 37 million tons of lumber when buildings come down gets sent straight to the landfill. And concrete gets reused and rebar gets reused, so what gives there? And so, once you do the math, you're seeing these huge numbers. So lumber gets thrown away, lumber prices are going up, something doesn't add up there. So what we looked at is, it's about $18 billion worth of lumber that gets thrown away every year. And these construction sites, they're already sorting the materials on site. This isn't, this isn't one of those problems where you have to sort all your plastics after you throw it in the recycling bin. The wood is already being sorted and sent directly to landfills. So this wood, is it in bad shape? Like, what's going on there? So we found that this is exactly what's going on. Is wood comes from trees. It gets sent to mills where they chop it up, they put it into rectangular cross section, something that can actually be used to build a building, and then goes and lives in a building for 30 to 40 years. And the wood's in great shape, unless it's unless it's in a farm somewhere, and then you get totally rotted wood. But usually when the building comes down, it's not because the building is super unstable. The wood is generally in a stable form. It's actually dried out. It's in a much better shape than if you bought it. Usually when you buy a house, you kind of expect some deformation over time as the wood dries and it gets down to 5% moisture. So the reason they're throwing it away, the reason we can't do this nice circular thing where you take a building and you just put it back into a mill and build another building out of it is because of the nails. So there's all this metal in the wood. And so I guess I lied when I said we're not a sorting company. We are a sorting company. We just sort the metal out of wood. So the problem ends up being that anytime you send a piece of wood to a mill, they are terrified of hitting a nail with their tools. If like a single tool hits a nail, it's basically donezo for the day. It completely breaks the tool and you're, SOL. So what we are doing is we're promising 100% metal-free wood. And the process for doing that is through automation. And when we started looking at this, we were like, is this actually profitable? How much metal is there? There's already people who are cleaning lumber by hand. They're just doing it on the, the really nice stuff, like actually barnwood. For some reason, barns sell for like a crazy amount. But the idea is people are already taking wood. They're taking out the nails by hand. It's a pain, and they're selling it back, to the mills. And the mills are still terrified of this, by the way. They're even scared of virgin lumber because there's sometimes bullets in the trees. So yeah, I don't know. Yeah, it's a crazy world out there. You see all kinds of stuff. But Urban Machine, we were thinking, like, how can we do this? How can we just take out all the metal from the wood, promise people, hey, it's been through this super sensitive metal detector. It's basically good to go. Can you just put it back into another building? Can we just turn buildings into Lego pieces that you disassemble and you put back together in another shape? So you can turn a warehouse into mixed-use housing. So the answer is yes, and it's super worth it. It's a ton of lumber and it's a ton of money. So we think that this is going to scale big time. And where are we right now? Well, we are on our third iteration, and yeah, people want to see the robots. So we're on the third iteration. Every iteration here, it starts with, it's alphabetical. So we had Awesome Ash, which died in an accident. We had Brave Baobab, which was entirely made of 80/20 and would have never seen the field. And this is Charming Cypress. So we've got these 4 robot arms, and we take in square cross-dimensional lumber, which is the vast majority of it. We use computer vision to see where all the nails are. This is the part that's exciting to me. And then we use these custom gantry robot arms to pull with crazy forces all the nails out of the wood.
Why 4 arms?
Because there's 4 sides. Sometimes you can just use the structure of the problem to solve a lot of other problems. So yeah, I mean, we did think about all kinds of things. Like, what if we had one arm on a circle and it just drove around the entire piece of wood? And then we ended up thinking, well, what if we had 4 arms and then 4 more arms and then 4 more arms? And we had like 16 arms. And then they all work on the wood at the same time. And it's actually cheap because it's not these 6-axis robot arms that cost $130K. So we ended up making our own robot arms, and it's going to be super cost effective. And we're going to have so many robots zipping around. Right now, it's just the 4. And last time I was at Studio 45, I had the pleasure of talking about how we were going to deploy our robot. You guys didn't give me control back. I can't go to the next slide.
Just shout Nate.
Nate! Oh, hey, the laptop's behind me. I control my own destiny. So the thing I wanted to talk about that has been on my mind a lot since before our deployment and after deployment is how do you scale quickly as a robotic startup? And I don't mean scale up in terms of employees, because who's got money for that? I mean scale up in terms of speed, like iteration speed. We built 3 prototypes, and now we want to make it more stable, and making things stable means you have to move slower. So what do we do? Where do we optimize our process? And so this is kind of where we were at before we had a robot on the field. This is at least what we said we were at. We design robots, we buy the parts, we build them, and somewhere in there the software gets done, and then we test it and we learn. This is kind of what it ends up being, is you're like designing while you have parts on the floor and the software engineers are trying to build stuff on that, and then someone comes in, messes with the wiring, and the robot's broken, and it slows everything down. So we did it. We deployed a few months ago. We are now processing wood at American Canyon near Napa Valley at a lumber mill. And we just run tons of wood through the machine every day. We've got 2 guys who just, that's their job. They feed the robot and they take what the robot made and put it on a truck and sell it. So that's been super exciting. And what it's enabled is this beautiful thing, which is actually happening now. So finally, the software guys, myself included, get to have productivity back. So we are we now get to develop on a robot that isn't being touched by hardware engineers. And I apologize, but whenever hardware engineers touch a robot, something breaks. Whenever I touch a robot, something breaks, but it's like different. Like I can fix it remotely. You can't fix wiring issues remotely. So having this separate loop is amazing because hardware development is inherently different from software development. I can run tests on a robot that affect like, oh yeah, we're gonna grab along the shaft of the nail and then we're gonna do some wiggling motion and then pull. And then run it for a day, get 10,000 picks worth of samples and find out like, yeah, was that 3% better or not? But hardware engineers have to like, I don't know, buy a part and from Amazon and wait for it to arrive and find out it doesn't fit a data sheet spec and then have to do all this other stuff that I don't want to deal with. And so they get to do that on their little loop there. So we've unlocked a bunch of potential there. So this is kind of what I want. I want this hockey stick growth. This is the like actual shape of our current progress. Just happened to find some clip art that fit it. So what we're doing right now is we're trying to take advantage of the fact that we have a robot in the field, because having a robot in the field doesn't just mean progress, it actually means a lot more work. And if you don't manage it correctly, it might actually slow everything to a crawl. So we've managed to find a way to make it an accelerator instead of a detractor on our processes. So what we're doing is we're collecting all the data. Every piece of data that the robot gathers, we're saving it, storing it, and making sure we're collecting the right types of data. Usually this means all the point clouds of the wood. We have like, all these sensors, and they're collecting all kinds of crazy, crazy data. And what we're trying to do is figure out how can we label as much of this and churn it back into the robot every week so we can see the process improvements. So if you have your own robot and you're a hardware startup, I don't know how many people here are in a hardware startup. That's sort of my target market here. If you're in a hardware startup, definitely do this. Start A/B testing as soon as you can. And if you're a software engineer at a hardware startup, that means beg for the sensors that you need to run A/B tests. So in my case, I lost that battle, but what that meant is having sensors that would tell us if the beak on the robot, which we call big birds by the way, is closed or not. So we could tell if we successfully grabbed a nail. And when we had that for a week before some wires got torn out and people decided not to keep it, we were able to A/B test changes really quickly. So we had to switch to using other methods for A/B testing. Josh is giving me a spell here.
Question.
Yeah.
Could you talk about what success and improvement looked like when you already had 100% nail removal?
Well, we're not.
Repeat the question because the microphone doesn't hear it.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're not here yet. This is where we're at. We're at the 90% mark right now in terms of like on a per pick success rate. So actually, yeah, let's just switch over to Q&A because I want to answer everybody's questions.
If there's questions, please address them to this microphone here. You can stand up and use the microphone, therefore it can be recorded for the...
I can also repeat the questions because I know you probably don't want to stand up and go to a microphone and ask your questions. Yes, go ahead.
I have a lot of technical questions. Sounds really cool, but what's your biggest non-technical problem besides you mentioned process and iterations?
Yeah, what's our biggest non-technical problem? There's a lot of them. I mean, the process, that's sort of been the one that's been on my mind the most lately, is how do we improve our process so that we can iterate quickly? I think probably it's just the fact that the robot is breaking at a certain interval, and those intervals are hard to predict. So at first it was every day we had an engineer on site, and then it was every other day, and then within a few weeks it was once a week. But now we're in this state where we don't send someone up there unless something breaks. But when something breaks, you really want to send something up there because you've got 2 guys being paid to clean wood there for all day. So it's sort of this transition period where you're this 12-person startup, so you don't have a field dedicated team to manage a fleet of robots, so you have 1 robot. I think that's kind of this middle ground there. Awesome, yeah.
What's the scale of your robot? Like how many cubic feet can you process, I don't know, like per minute right now? And where do you see it growing to?
Yeah, so I'll give you two answers for that. The scale is it's like a physically large robot. It's about 40 feet. And then you need 40 feet for the inflow because you're handling these really long pieces of lumber. And then because what goes in must come out, you need another 40 feet at the end to be able to handle the outflow. So it's actually 120 feet long. Luckily, that's totally fine because at demolition sites, which I kind of missed a key detail here, we drive the robot to the demo sites. And then we process wood on site so that we don't have to drive the wood back and forth to different places. We clean the wood on site, and then we ship it directly to the customers. So there's no extra trucking necessary. So that's the scale on the physical side, but the scale on the speed side that's sort of the key here is like where along this hockey stick can we go in terms of board feet. So board feet is this really stupid metric. It's like 12 inches by 12 inches by 1 inch. But that's what we're trying to maximize is the volume of wood that we process every day. So right now we're about, depending on the cross section of the wood, like 1,000 to 2,000 board feet per day. We want to do about 5x. We're around here in terms of our goals. And if we can't hit that, then we have to make the machine cheaper. And I don't want to do that, so better to just go fast.
Do you get paid to take the wood from the sites?
Yeah, do we get paid to take the wood? Yeah, so the nice thing is all of these demo sites have to pay the landfills right now to get rid of the wood. So they're just happy to have a source that they can give to for free. And in fact, right now there's just a lot of tailwinds for us. So we've actually been paid so far.
Seems like with ESG, you might be able to get paid.
Yeah, if there's a friendly local government too, I mean, that helps a lot. But our goal is to be able to operate in Texas where there's just no support from the political side, but the economics are just so strong that we can succeed.
You mentioned earlier that the mills are scared to death of nails.
Yeah.
What kind of proof do they need that you didn't miss a nail in your vision?
Yeah, so our metal detector, it's this like huge Stargate monolith that you can feed wood through. It'll trigger from like half of a staple. It's super sensitive. So it'll take a while to build that trust, but I think it'll be easy once they see that. Because a lot of these lumber reclaiming, smaller shops, they're not buying metal detectors. They're just not running the volume that they could be able to afford that. Shoot.
Yeah, I'm a little confused about, so you're building the robots, and that's really what you're doing, but you also have this huge business to manage with the wood.
Right.
Getting the wood and selling the wood, so you're kind of doing two different things. Do you at some point want to just focus on the machine and building the machine and growing the machine and different sizes of the machine? Or do you want to have this huge company that does this great recycling program, but is also, that's one thing. And the other thing is, so if you're at 90 and you need to get to 100 before you can really sell it to go in mills, that's what you're saying. You have to be at 100, right?
Okay, so two questions. The first is, do we want to be in the wood business or do we want to be in the robot business? And the second question is, like, where do we actually need to be in terms of throughput? So for that first question, I don't want to be in the wood business. I don't want to deal with the demo contractors and all the delays they have to. They're very unreliable people. And I also don't want to deal with selling the wood. I mean, there's huge demand, but then you're selling these kind of like antique, unique pieces on a per board foot basis, or you're trying to find out like can we put this into can we glue this together? That's they call it glue lamb, but can we make like huge panels out of this and sell it in bulk? We don't want to be in that business. We want someone else to figure that out, but we want to operate at scales that haven't been seen yet in the salvage lumber business. So right now, while we're still operating the robot, and the robot's kind of in its janky state, like half working, half Legos, it makes sense for us to source the wood and us to process it and us to sell it. And then eventually, once it's more productized, maybe in a year or two, we will lease the robot to these existing salvage lumber shops who already have these connections in place and can start scaling up their businesses. The second question, how accurate do we need to be? And can we do less, or can we make it faster? So that's always, there's a really simple equation for that, is if you miss a nail, how many seconds does it take for a laborer to fix that, to take the nail out himself or herself? That's basically what we're dealing with, is we have people on site to run the robot. So we can lean really hard on that human element. The question is it still economical, right? And can we, like, if we were able to quadruple our board feet, but our nail picking precision drops by 10%, like, is there still a balance there? So there's definitely a curve that we're traveling along and finding, what's the best spot, what precision do we need? Obviously we want, the perfect precision, the highest throughput, but there's definitely a lot of spots along there where we could miss a few nails and have the laborers fix that. We even have a paint gun that's going to shoot on the wood where metal was detected, so that they can very quickly go in there and find it and take it out and pass QC. So lots of play in there.
If you miss a nail and it doesn't pass metal detection, can you go backwards and get it out again with the robot?
Yeah, definitely, and that's what we do right now. Is we fail QC, we run it through again, and we've got the paint there, or we will have the paint very soon.
You said a human takes it out. Can't the robot go back and take it out?
Yeah, so we're kind of figuring out what's the best way to do that, since this is our first machine in deployment. Right now, kind of the day laborers, they know what the machine can and can't do. They've sort of learned that. So sometimes I have to go up there and be like, hey, by the way, new software update, don't touch this stuff. It might get it, or it might not, and then they end up cleaning it themselves. So there's a little bit of play there, but yeah.
Yeah, I was just curious about, you kind of already answered this a little bit, but that last 10%, you mentioned nails as your sort of flagship enemy, but
Yeah.
what about staples? What about pieces of foil? What about coins that somebody stuck into a tree? So where is that lower threshold where you don't have to worry about it? Are staples still a big problem for the mills, or is there?
So the mills don't care about staples, but we kind of want to be able to take staples as well. So we do support staples, and we support we have a lot of ideas for how to handle screws, and that is in progress. Lucky thing about screws, they didn't use screws in construction until the 80s, and the buildings in the 80s aren't being taken down yet, at least most of them. So we've bought ourselves some time there, and we can keep processing wood that's mostly just nails and a few jank, bullets. And there was a barn last week that had a lot of BB gun pellets. So yeah, there's going to be a really long tail, but it's not quite like self-driving car long tail of possibilities. We just have to handle, what kind of random stuff did contractors add to a building over its 100-year lifespan.
Gusset plates and stringer hangers and lag bolts.
Yeah, lag bolts. So there is that. So the question is what about lag bolts and a few other things?
Gusset plates and stringer hangers.
I don't know what those are, but the lag bolts I've seen a lot of before.
Gusset plate is just a plate you put two pieces together and you put a plate on it.
Oh yeah, I hate those. Sometimes there are these gusset plates that they put against two pieces of wood to hold them together. Yeah, for some reason, dual pieces of wood or something we're going to have to support. But we'll get to that when we get to that. But right now, the lag bolts, and there's kind of this long list of things that we don't support. That's what the laborers do at the front of the line. So we have this nice inflow station. They've got all these pneumatic tools, try to optimize that process so that they can chop the pieces of wood that have huge bolts, or take those away, feed it into the robot with 1,000 nails. It comes out without any nails, and you get that speed up from the automation.
How much does it matter how little you cut the wood? Does that make sense? How hard are you trying to preserve the length that you get it from the site originally?
Right. So how much are we trying to preserve the length of the wood? So our competitor is a wood chipper. So when the wood gets sent to a landfill, they throw it in these huge grinders, and then they pass a magnet over it to remove the nails. And man, why don't we do that? So the moment you cut the fiber of the wood, especially at that level, you're losing 25 to 30x its value. So it's so much more valuable in its original strong form, right? Yeah, you could glue it all together and do some, glue is bad for the environment, by the way, but you could glue it all together and build some more buildings out of it, but it's not nearly the same strength when the fibers aren't broken. And the nail holes don't really do anything to the strength, so you're in a really good spot if you can just pull out the nails. So there is this theory I've had in my mind of okay, eventually we're going to have to automatically chop the wood. We don't have an automatic chopper yet, and I'm scared of what kind of safety systems we're going to have around it. But once we do, we're going to have some kind of calculation there that says, okay, this is a 40-foot piece of wood. The chop would happen near the middle. That's going to affect the price by this much. But if we put a person to remove, the impossible object, that would take 2 minutes, and it's worth the not chopping, or it's worth chopping. So there'll be some automatic cost calculation that we'll do, and then sometimes it'll chop and sometimes it won't, and it'll flag it for a person to clean it.
So I have a two-part question.
All right.
First one, this is super cool and impressive technology, but because of my ignorance about mills, I'm wondering why don't, or did they try to improve their hardware so that they could actually process this wood instead of having to build amazing robot technology? And secondly, okay, after you tackle wood, what do you want to do next with the robots?
Yeah, okay. So the question is, why aren't mills better instead of, deep technology, R&D development, and what are we going to do next? So I don't know why mills aren't better, but I suspect it's because metal is really hard, and tools are really brittle because they have to be so hard. Material scientists somewhere in here could probably tell me why. But my understanding is, when you plane wood, and you just totally destroy the tool. So we're probably not even close to being there in terms of like tool strength. There are some interesting things you can do. Like there's these CLT panels, cross-laminated timber. You can build these like huge 40-foot by 40-foot things. Like maybe if you planed the wood down and you had like the nails cut off, you could use metal in there. But it's so sketchy, like the mills really don't like that. So we think, our value prop is it passed the metal detector. And they don't have to worry about the technology. And the second question is, what are we gonna do next? So I think there's a lot of options, but we might go into sheet goods, but we might also go into the deconstruction process. So there's deconstruction ordinances that are starting to pass, where you have to take the building apart carefully so that a higher percentage of it can be reused. And they're not really talking about the wood reuse, they're talking about just everything else around that. But deconstruction is gonna be great for us because we're gonna have longer beams come out of buildings that haven't been splintered by the bulldozers. So building deconstruction tooling, like maybe some crazy end effector that goes at the end of a bulldozer and kind of like grabs on and chops the ends, that might be the next spot, so we can increase the salvage rate per building. Yeah.
Okay, so it sounds like you guys have one machine getting pretty frequent updates right now, which is a pretty solid position to be in, but you also want to scale up. At my workplace, we kind of lost control of the storm, so to speak, and we were putting these products in schools. I wonder how you guys are thinking about what it's like to scale up something that's ostensibly going in sort of an industrial setting. Maybe not all of them gets the same software situation, and maybe you start adding like more and more components, let's say, like more and more products. Like how do you make that software ecosystem work? And I'm just curious, is it just all running on Ubuntu, or what you got going on there?
Well, I'm not gonna get too much into our software stack, but I would love to after this because just big software geek here. I mean, the hardware diverges, and so the software diverges as well. That's the problem. And so the way we're handling that right now, and we do have 2 robots. We have one in the shop right now that is in the procurement/build stage, and it's got all these cool upgrades I'm really excited about. But we have 2 branches on our code base. One of them is for supporting the existing robot, and one of them is for supporting all the changes in the new one. And whenever we add a feature, like a new picking algorithm or something specific to the hardware, we either merge it into both branches or we merge it into the newest one.
How does it get the update?
We use a Docker stack with robot operating system running inside of it. There's like 6 layers. But yeah, we will, once we have like a huge fleet of robots, it's gonna be a really interesting problem to like push different versions to everything. And my background is not in robotics. I came from another software startup where we were building like large scale AI video analytics platforms. So I love deployment strategies, and I'm gonna really enjoy building that out.
Just spend more money on it early on.
Oh, we care a lot. Yeah, we care a lot about the deployment strategy.
Actually, we need one more question.
All right, one more question. Shoot.
What was the most significant pivot that you made, and how did you reach that decision?
Okay, what was the most significant pivot that we made, and how did we reach that decision? That's a really good question. That pivot was the pivot from what we call shuttles to rollers. So a huge problem in the first 2 prototypes was how do we just like move the wood around? And we had all these expectations about like, can we move the wood around in this like millimeter precise form? We were basically treating the robot like a huge CNC machine where you know where the workpiece is at every part. So we had these shuttles, like think like a train. The wood was held really tightly, and we moved it around. And then like the shuttles to move the wood, you had to like let go and like caterpillar around, and it was chaos. It was also really complicated. Each shuttle had 7 degrees of freedom. We were going to have 5 of them to build out the full system, and like that's not even removing metal. Why are we spending all this time on that? So we put them on these like spiky rollers so that the nails could float underneath. You can't put it on a conveyor because if it's on a conveyor, the wood is in this porcupine state, so it'll kind of go all jank. So we put on these like floating spikes, and that helped a lot. You can kind of see, see these like little spiky boys there. When it moves, it like rolls forward. So that was the biggest pivot. It simplified a lot of things. We had to do a couple changes in terms of our expectations of where is the wood in the system. And now we're dealing with those issues of how do we track the wood in the system again, now that we aren't holding onto it as tightly, but I digress. Thank you so much for paying attention to my rants, and I hope to meet all of you after this.
Okay, Miranda, you're up.
Okay, perfect.
And if you do the videos, the laptop's just right here.
Okay, great. Hello. I'm about to do a very classic big tech thing and present about my work in a very opaque way, but I would love to answer questions after that might be more specific than I'm trying to get into right now. So my presentation is going to be on making the built environment smarter with batteries. We're going to give a high-level overview of grid electrification and some interesting battery technologies that will help enable that, as well as some emerging ones that are not yet ready to enable it, but hopefully soon. So the development of the built environment requires a functional and an efficient electric grid, and I see 3 main problems with today's electrical grid. First of all, we have aging infrastructure. Our stuff is 20, 30 years old. It's at the end of its lifespan, and the costs and logistics associated with upgrading this infrastructure are immense and sometimes prohibitive. There's also increased demand and congestion. There's a lot of people in the world. A lot of them live in cities, and a lot of them use a lot of electronics all the time. So that's a big issue that puts strain on our grid. And then lastly, we have renewable energy integration. As I'm sure you guys are aware, there's a lot of tailwinds pushing forward renewable energy in America, especially the Inflation Reduction Act right now. But integrating renewable energy into our grid such that it doesn't increase the variability of energy availability or cause any other unforeseen issues is a problem in and of itself. But batteries are great for all 3 of these problems. So with the aging, it's kind of a similar solution for all of these, but with the aging infrastructure, we can create virtual infrastructure by placing batteries strategically in the grid such that we pull strain away from our more fragile systems during peak demand. For demand, very similar thing. We're going to try to do peak shaving. So during the night, people use a lot of electricity from like 4 to 9 p.m. So what we can do is when there's that peak demand, we can store energy that was generated during the day when there's a lot of sun and people are using electricity, and then send it to the grid during those peak hours. And then lastly, with renewable energy integration, again, we have this intermittency and variability issue that batteries are going to help us solve by storing that energy until we actually need it later. So battery energy storage systems exist across the energy landscape. Tesla has products in a couple of these, which we can talk a little bit about later. But yeah, the biggest driver of increased battery storage capacity is going to be the industrial scale greater than 10 megawatt hours, which already makes up 86% of the annual capacity being added. The growth rate there is going to be like 30%, high 20s, compared to these ones, which are more like 13, 14% for residential and industrial energy storage systems. But they're all very important to grid reliability and electrification. We're also seeing like a huge increase in investments in the space, and the capacity we have in the US is expected to quintuple by 2050. Yeah, so a key enabler is the lowering cost of lithium-ion cell production. I work on lithium-ion cells at Tesla that we make in-house, and the fact that we're able to achieve cost parity with the existing mass-produced Panasonic cells on our product is awesome, as well as the fact that the batteries are just decreasing so much in cost that they're actually a viable solution for some of our problems with the grid today is excellent and is a key enabler of the renewable integration and the other upgrades that I talked about earlier. So yeah, these are some of the cells that we can use to achieve this reliable grid, as well as provide people with more options for industrial scale storage, so like backing up a hospital's electricity or residential storage. These guys are by far the most popular, but for grid scale, like for EVs and kind of across the value chain, but also for grid scale, a lot of the companies are moving to this LFP due to the increased cycle life, and they're willing to take a hit on the energy density for that. In a lot of different battery chemistries we deal with, and I'm not a chemistry guy, I should preface this, I work on the mechanical side of things, so dimensions. But a lot of the battery metrics that we care about compete with each other, so you can increase one and that induces a trade-off in another. So as you can see, a lot of these have really crazy specs that they'll send to the public, these, a lot of emerging battery technologies will come out with oh, we did this crazy thing in the lab, but they won't tell you that it's at the expense of another thing that you really need, and they might not be able to make more than one of them. So yeah, there's a ton of drama in the battery space. It's kind of fun.
What are the acronyms there?
Yes, oh yeah, of course. So the two up on the top, those are both lithium-ion batteries, and the acronyms are the chemical composition of the cathode. So NMC is going to be nickel, manganese, cobalt, and then LFP is going to be lithium iron phosphate. And then we have, sodium ion and sodium sulfur for those two compositions down there. But yeah, what I work on at Tesla is the 4680 project, so they're lithium ion batteries with a larger form factor. We can talk about those if anybody's familiar and or interested. But yeah, this was my talk. Thank you.
Really cool. Yeah, I've tried to learn about batteries, and I was extremely confused about all the different dimensions you can kind of select on. Is there a way to think about different batteries, and would you have a battery installation with a mix of different technologies?
Okay, so
Please repeat the question so the audience outside will hear the question.
yes, of course. So the question was, how do we think about different dimensional characteristics of the battery, and then also can we install multiple different batteries into one entity? Yeah, so the dimensional characteristics of the battery, I should have really put, I was gonna do a little appendix slide with this on it. But basically you have your electrodes and your packaging. And there's a couple different form factors. So there's cylindrical cells, those are what goes in Teslas. There are pouch cells, which are a flexible casing, and the electrodes are a different shape. And then there's prismatic cells, and there's some other less used form factors. The dimensional considerations in the battery are basically to maximize the surface area of the cathode that you have in there without causing it to touch the anode or otherwise interfere with the packaging in a detrimental way. So a lot of what we do as a company that's making things at this scale is making sure yeah, it's great to be able to make one battery with an optimized cathode, but what does that look like when you have to make 10 million? And what does it look like when you have to make 10 million in a month? And then with the external packaging, it's a lot of thinking about what product the battery is going to go into. So do we need to be concerned with structural integrity, with puncture risk, and how do we fit the electrodes inside the battery such that we don't damage them during assembly? There's also a whole bunch of really interesting lifetime modeling you can do on cells that does affect your sizing of dimensions at beginning of life, because these things have to last for 8 years, and a lot of things move around during that time. As far as mixing batteries, it could be fine from a mechanical perspective if you like isolate them and then you use software to manage the different characteristics. So I think it would be maybe not the most cost-effective thing to do unless you were getting them super cheap from like the recycling thing, but you could do it. So you would probably just have to have hardware in between your like big grid scale devices and coupled with software that would like adapt to voltage differences and different rates of discharge, etc. So yeah, it is feasible, but like I said, like maybe not the most cost effective to do within like one operation, because economies of scale are huge in batteries. Yeah, like those prices, they change a lot depending on how much you're gonna order.
Quick reminder, if you do have a question, we are filming, so if you can come up to the microphone so you can hear it, that's best. Thank you so much.
I have two questions. So first is about the LFP batteries that are currently launching Teslas, and so I noticed with these new LFP batteries, unlike the traditional ones that Tesla was using before, in the Tesla app, it's actually suggesting that you charge it to 100% on a weekly basis. Why is that, and why in the previous iterations of the battery should you not charge it to 100%, specifically focusing on degradation?
Yes, I don't entirely know. Someone told me this a little bit ago and I completely forgot, but I know you are only supposed to charge these ones to 80% and these ones have to be charged to 100% for capacity retention. I am more than happy to ask someone and get back to you though. I'm sorry.
I have a...
asking a question. Introduce yourself like one sentence first.
Oh. Sure. Siva, I'm a hardware engineer.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you. I actually worked on batteries myself. I'm curious, quick second question too, on the sodium-ion batteries too. So you have startups like Natron Energy working on that. So first of all, is Tesla working on that? If they are, like, when are they going to push it to their production cars?
I think people that are working on that probably have a ways to go. And Tesla is probably very focused on mass producing the 4680 with the existing chemistries that we produce. That is probably what I could say. I'll say personally, my personal opinion, not of my company, I see that it's very challenging to commercialize battery technology, and I think any of these are probably a ways out. I think it's great that it's getting funded. The R&D work needs to be done. We need to enable startups to make more than incremental advancements in battery technology, because the big companies like your Apple is making such small advancements, and even Tesla, because we have to mass produce at such a high scale, we can make slightly better than maybe Apple or Panasonic's incremental improvements, but it's nothing like this. So putting in the money to do this R&D is great, but it is really, really hard to commercialize this technology.
Yeah, I'm curious, what is the road to scaling, getting these batteries out there? Because obviously the grid needs them. Who's buying them? Who's paying for them? I know of these people who are trying to build wind farms, and they can't connect their wind farms to the grid because the grid just can't handle the extra capacity. Could they buy a battery and then tell the grid, I have a battery now? Yeah, how are these batteries getting out?
Okay, so the question is how are we actually dealing with the barriers for this technology to become useful at a grid scale? There are a lot of complicated and evolving regulations. The financial structure of the grid was definitely set up for this oil and gas economy, as well as generation on demand, where we're not dealing with the lag where we can only generate wind energy when it's windy, but we might not need it when it's windy. We were just burning that coal whenever. So I think they're working, at a government pace on improving the legislature such that this problem isn't an issue, and in improving the availability of these systems. I think there's a lot of money that's there for these systems, but I think we don't really know how to respond to issues and also how to update our legislation. There's, I think it's the biggest Tesla megapack grid scale installation in the US is at Moss Landing, which is near here, and they've had some issues even getting that up and running. So, and people are like not sure how to respond. They're like, do we have a town hall? Are we gonna like, because this is a new technology, be like really overly paranoid? So I think it's just slow, but I think that the momentum is there to where like we'll have better, like a more favorable like local legislation and like improve our transmission systems, like the different things that actually connect the different parts of the puzzle. Because people definitely want to build batteries now.
Yeah, Peter Lowe here. I was just curious, is it currently profitable to recycle NMC or LFP? And if not, what's the pathway to getting there?
That is so a Redwood Materials question. I do not know. They seem like they're doing great. But yeah, I'm not sure. The materials are still good at end of life. So I'm sure there's a ton of challenges with, I think with any like industrial process in today, like we can do a lot with smart factory to kind of enable these changes and quality management, but I think in batteries in general, like the metrology is such a huge thing because like I am in fights over 100 microns every day or less. Sometimes it's 10 microns. And like measuring that at the pace that you need to probably get the economy of scale that you need to recycle these things is possible, but it's very challenging and it's something that gets better every day, but it's still, I think like the metrology side at the speed and resolution that we need is like a key enabler for technology like this.
What are your thoughts on recycling or reusing existing EV batteries, kind of piggybacking off of that, but maybe reusing or reusing rather than recycling? Like taking a pack from a vehicle, energy storage, and giving, usually a vehicle, and giving it a second life in a different application.
Yeah, so the question was thoughts on second lives for EV batteries, giving them another go in a different application in their same state without breaking them down. I think there's a lot of potential applications. I think it might be a ways out because like if the new batteries are having trouble kind of keeping up with the technical demands that they need for like grid stationary storage, it might be hard for a used EV battery to do that at like a density that's profitable for the companies that are investing in these installments. But I think at the same time, there's so many cool ways to second life EV batteries, especially like people's homes. Like maybe that scale is a great way to start. And there's also some interesting technology around sorting, right? So there's going to be like an array of different performance levels going into the pack that's going to only increase in spread during life. So maybe if you're picking like the best cells, they're going to have almost the same capacity as they did at beginning of life. And if you can make it profitable to still build that technology while not building kind of the runts of the litter, so to speak, then I think you could do something really cool. There's also a lot of cool people working in that space, so I wouldn't be surprised if something great happens.
So I you know, obviously batteries have changed so much in the past 20 years, and they're used, you know, for EVs and bikes, and but I'm also I'm concerned a little about combustibility. There was a dive ship that killed about 30 people or so, 40 people down by Catalina Island off of LA. There are all these stories of people with bikes, e-bikes in their apartments in New York. That, and I've read so many of these articles. I've never found if it's like super cheap batteries, are they super cheap chargers? There seems like there's really no regulation right now for these things, and so many people end up in these horrific situations. So I'm curious, you know, if any of the house batteries have burned down houses yet. Is it something people? I mean, certainly Teslas have combusted. So I'm curious, you know, how that fits into all this. And then my second question is, so when looking at all these different types of batteries, when will Teslas have 500 miles range?
Okay, so there were two questions. The first is essentially what are we going to do about battery fires, and what is the root cause of some of the fires that we've seen in the field today. And then the second question was when are Teslas going to have 500 miles of range. I'm just waiting for someone to ask about Elon's Twitter. I know one of you guys has it in your head right now. To answer your first question, yeah, this is a huge issue, and after being in the field, I I wouldn't trust like a lot of suppliers with their products. I think the thing that matters most is to fail safely. So by nature, some of these technologies enable like far reduced combustion, but like with lithium-ion batteries, that's always like going to be an issue, and it will be hard to manufacture 100% of the batteries at this scale that we need without any defects that will ever lead to field failures during life. That's the goal. We have very ambitious quality goals for ourselves that we get super close to every day. Like we're really working hard to prevent failures during manufacturing. But I think the biggest thing that we think about is like resisting propagation once one cell fails. So what can happen with a lot of these big fires is like one cell fails and it will cause the internal temperature of the surrounding cells to reach a critical point where they go into what's called thermal runaway, and there's no pulling them back from that. So there's a lot of, and I work on the cell, not the pack, but the pack can be, and the cell can be designed in ways that prevent this propagation. So we really need to enforce propagation resistance in packs so that if one cell fails, there isn't like a catastrophic event. And that's actually what happened at this Moss Landing mega pack plant. Like there was a fire, people were really concerned because they've never had this happen, and they weren't sure how to respond. It turned out to be the result of an installation issue, I think. But ultimately, like, you just wait till the fire goes out. The fire went out, it didn't propagate and light everything else on fire, which is the design. But I'm sure that a lot of these like cheap Chinese e-bikes, they do not care, allegedly.
Well, there was a lot of uncertainty during that fire. They're like, it shouldn't propagate.
Yeah.
Nobody knew until
Yeah.
it didn't propagate.
Well, I had faith.
Yeah.
I had questions specifically in vehicle-to-grid technology. So I think a hacker, was it like a year, 2 years ago, you can Google it, but like hacked the Tesla software, noticed that there was vehicle-to-grid software built into the Tesla, but Tesla just hasn't pushed that software update so people can access it yet. So you talked about peak shaving, some of these other things with the introduction of LFP specifically. It seems like cycle life, energy density, and cost is all optimized. So what's Tesla waiting for? When can we expect to see vehicle-to-grid technology pushed?
I don't know what Tesla is waiting for, but I do think vehicle-to-grid technology is, like, from the software side, as you said. Sorry, this question was adoption of vehicle-to-grid technology and when will Tesla do that specifically. I can't really speak for Tesla as a whole, but, I mean, that technology exists. I think it's just a matter of having enough people have the hardware in their homes to make it a viable business to sell them what they need to have the vehicle feed back into the grid, and then maybe giving them enough incentive cost-wise to do so. The biggest barrier to residential adoption of like having standalone batteries in your house, which would enable you to do all of this, is the cost and the concerns over performance. So I think when companies like Tesla and other potential startups in the space can dispel the consumers' worries about both the cost and the performance, that's when we'll see widespread adoption of vehicle-to-grid. Back there?
Category of battery R&D you think is the most underrated?
Well, they're all pretty rated right now. I don't know. Maybe like the Metal Air. She's kind of a wild one, but like I feel like generally there's a lot of hype around this technology, which is great. But a lot of people just like go around like spouting things that sound really good and they come with consequences. So yeah, these metrics are very complicated and very complete, and like you have to check a lot of boxes before you can have something that's safe, let alone mass producible. But yeah, my coworker was trading an options wheel on QuantumScape recently, and I was like, this is like the craziest thing I've ever seen. But yeah, anyways, any more questions? All right, great. Thank you guys so much.
Okay, time for raise, Dan.
All right, and my partner Bridget.
And Bridget.
The brains.
Tag team, yeah.
Brains of the operation.
Down button moves you forward. It's very confusing.
Awesome.
All right, let's get this situated. Okay, thanks for having us, everyone. Raise is unique, a little bit different than the hardware companies that have spoken. We are a full-service commercial real estate firm with brokerage, project management, and workplace strategy. So any company that needs office space, from a startup to large multinational publicly traded companies like Samsara, which is a hardware company, we help them with their offices and manage the portfolio and think through how to acquire space. We recently got Y Combinator's new office down in Pier 70. We're working with OpenAI. We just did the Adept AI deal, and we're working with Palantir globally, and lots of VCs, Pair VC, and many others.
Yeah, so basically, as Dan said, we work with companies of all different stages, so from startup to well-established publicly traded groups. I'm going to go maybe the next one. And we work with our companies both nationally and internationally, so we can help with space anywhere, whether it's direct space, sublease space, or co-working space as well. We work with a number of co-working groups worldwide.
Okay, so here's how this ties into hardware. So in addition to kind of being a full service commercial real estate firm, we are also launching WorkplaceOS, which is essentially a one-stop shop for any corporate real estate leader or company executive to manage all things real estate. So within WorkplaceOS, we have 3 primary products. We have Deal Room, which is essentially search, which provides a Zillow-like experience to look at the market options. We can run multiple searches in different cities across the world all simultaneously. To give you a little bit of context on the industry, right now, and with legacy firms, I was at Cushman & Wakefield for almost 8 years. You would hire us, we would send you a PDF with the options that are on the market. It's very stale. It's not obviously updated real time. It gets lost in your inbox, and it's not a very rich experience. We're giving kind of a Zillow-like experience to the search process. Portfolio management. When you're a big multinational company, you have offices all over the world, you have expiration dates and all kinds of critical dates to keep track of. Some people have very expensive software products that do this for them, and then you still need someone to manage it. We're doing that essentially for free for our clients, kind of as a best practice. And then workplace analytics. This is really where the tie-in to hardware comes in. Workplace analytics essentially is, with hybrid work, one of the big things that companies are struggling and wrestling with is, how do we measure ROI in physical space? How do we make a decision to spend and invest in opening a new office somewhere and building, out a new office? How do we have data to support those types of decisions and optimize the workplace and all that? And so that's where workplace analytics comes in. We are going to provide kind of dashboard views on how existing spaces are being utilized. We could, using badge data and APIs to rippling and other kind of services, we can drill down to the specific team. So you want to know how certain teams are using the office versus others. We will be able to do that. So the first wave of APIs with hardware are going to be badge readers, Brevo, Envoy, those kinds of companies. The next wave will be kind of space utilization hardware, so like density, other kind of spatial measurement softwares, and then really we're just going to keep going. So I'm sure some of you have probably great ideas on what kind of integrations we might include as we continue to build it out. Oh, whoops, wrong way. Okay, yeah, so again, it's going to be dashboard kind of views. One thing that we found right now, the problem in the space is, right now, Envoy, Brevo, all these various providers, they'll send the data, but it's not very usable. It's almost, our clients will spend a ton of time digesting and just parsing through the raw data sets, and at the end of the day, they kind of almost blankly look like, what did we just look at? And so like the integrations with rippling and things like that, where we can drill in and look at specific team utilization, will be super helpful.
Yeah, and I think just adding onto that too, in a post-pandemic world, this is just going to be a continuing growing need. So companies like Density that are using built-in sensors to better help companies understand space utilization, I think that'll be a continuing growing space, because the badge reader data is awesome. It tells you, how many people are coming in, what are your peak days, but it doesn't tell you much about how the space itself is being utilized once people are in there. So we're working closely with groups like that just to help our clients better understand, like, hey, now you can look at which meeting rooms are getting the most use throughout the day. Is it a 4-person meeting? Is it more 6-person, 8-person, whatever? So you can make better decisions about how you build out future space, how you maybe adapt your existing space to better accommodate your employees' needs.
Yeah, and so these are just some of our clients. We also do a ton of work with hardware companies. So I mentioned Samsara. We did Embark's deal. They had a very kind of robust needs for their operation. We did the Astronis deal where they helped them build out and design their labs where they're building their satellites down at Pier 70. And so, we can go as far and as deep on technical build-outs as our clients need. We have in-house project managers and space planners, and so we're here to help when you need it. And with that, shoot us your questions. Go.
So my question is more about WorkplaceOS, and essentially, like a lot of companies are talking about, like when they're building a space, right? How does sustainability sort of play into that, and what sort of features do you have in, like, let's say your workplace analytics to like talk about sustainability for a building?
Yeah, that's a good question. So the question was, how are you integrating sustainability into WorkplaceOS? Essentially, I think we don't know yet how we're going to do that into the workplace analytics piece of WorkplaceOS, but on the search portion, we have detailed information on every building, on if they are LEED certified, what sort of Energy Star rating. If that information is out there, we'll have that in there. And so as companies are, if that's an important factor in the search, they'll just be able to see right there if it's what level of LEED it is or whatever.
And then my second, it's not really a question, just like a compliment. I really liked your, as someone who's trying to go into UX UI design, I really appreciated how your slides were designed and stuff like that. So I really like that.
I'm going to tell our marketing person, and she's going to love you.
That's sick. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. Any other questions?
Okay, hi. I work at a startup, and I'm curious if you guys can give some advice on where so let me form this. Where do you guys save money for businesses? Because I think from my perspective, I don't even know what the office costs end up being because I don't need it yet.
Yeah.
But I wonder what you guys see as like, is it the time it takes to find one, or is it too much office too soon? Like what are you seeing, and where do you actually get the value to your customers at?
Yeah, that's a great question. So on the more traditional commercial real estate part of our business, it's really us having great subject matter expertise. And so our small team of 6 brokers in San Francisco controls 16% of the current tenant demand in the market. Why does that matter for our customers? We've literally negotiated and transacted with all of these landlords recently, and we can take that knowledge, that firsthand knowledge, to all of our clients and help them leverage that in all their negotiations. Our project management team, they built out Stripe's headquarters down on the peninsula from scratch. I don't know if you guys have seen OpenAI's office, but they've won design awards, and we can kind of bring all that subject matter expertise to bear. And on the software side, from a corporate real estate perspective, there are big teams that are in charge of managing, these big portfolios for the Googles of the world, or, Samsara is a great example. Many offices across the world. It is really cumbersome to track all of your data. One cool example, so remember the second product that I mentioned is portfolio management. When all these leases are in, when Samsara hired us, the first thing we did was like, okay, let's load all your lease information into portfolio management. We immediately found out that they had been forgetting to notify their existing landlords that they had a negotiated security deposit burned down in all of their leases. So, and right away, the product found a huge savings there, and then it just essentially makes it so you don't miss these critical dates and that have really big financial implications.
So it's really coming from like deep expertise in one slice of the process, because there's so much that goes into running a business, and you guys specialize in the office for these businesses.
Yeah, I mean, we're totally, we're really intentional about telling people, like, this is not self-service. The software platform is there to supplement the very white glove service that, you know, our teams provide. Hey.
Hi, I'm sorry, I know privacy is dead and I should probably get over it, but I'm worried you're building kind of the bossware from hell. Or maybe not you, but somebody else, you know. Is this going to give bosses the tools to fire someone if they're taking too many bathroom breaks, or the chair sensor says they're overweight, so it's going to cancel their health insurance or raise their rates? How do you deal with privacy concerns?
Yeah, so that's a great question. We've talked about this. So with respect to like rippling, that integration in particular, we're not going to the individual level, but you will be able to see office attendance at a particular office for a particular team. So, and I think at the end of the day, like, the responsibility also kind of lies on the end user and how they want to use it. Certainly we're not going to cross any crazy, creepy lines.
I wonder what your business model will look like as you scale. Will your software always be a proprietary tool for one brokerage team, or something else?
Yeah, another great question. So right now it is kind of our secret weapon. No one else really has it. I think over time, our hope is that it can be a standalone product and you don't have to use brokerage or project management. You could just use the standalone software on its own. Certainly, I think, you know, if we are to reach our maximum valuation, that's going to need to be the case. But right now, most of our clients that use the software use us as well.
So when you say you mean the clients directly will handle these?
Oh, well, no, I'm saying, you know, potentially in the future, there will be corporate real estate companies out there that use the software that don't need to use us for brokerage, have a different broker. So. Yes, in the back.
What was the most surprising thing that multiple clients requested for?
You want to take that one, Bridget?
Yeah, the question was, what was the most surprising thing that multiple clients have requested for? That's a good question. Think about that. I don't know if it's, you know, it really just depends. Every client's so different, and I think as we onboard more clients, it's always interesting to get feedback, particularly around like portfolio management, for instance. We just brought on a new company a couple of weeks ago, and we've had weekly meetings with them, and they keep bringing up new ideas, which is great. So the nice thing too about being a startup ourselves is we can take all of that live feedback and update the product accordingly. So I don't know if I have an answer on something that everybody's asked for, but it's a conversation process with every client.
Yeah, here's it for San Francisco companies. Actually, this was an R&D company that proposed this or asked this, is having zoning information on every single listing. Zoning is super nuanced and use is super nuanced, and it's kind of complex on like what qualifies to be in each building. And so we heard that from a couple companies, and now that's on all of our listing pages.
Hey everyone. Hey, my name's Kyle. I'm from Port Labs over in Oakland. Very familiar with the real estate market and space. And I was curious, you know, there's multiple trends happening right now with COVID bringing on like this fractionalization of the workplace where everyone's kind of different days, different places. So some companies are thinking, let's be smaller, kind of have a cell approach of having smaller offices with focused purposes. And then other companies are like, hey, commercial real estate is getting cheaper. Let's go back to the campus model where it's one thing does everything. I was curious if you have any new trends, or are companies thinking back to the campus model now that so much capacity is opened up?
Yeah, it's all over the board, honestly. I mean, I would say we're starting to see, I mean, there was a huge drastic shift to remote during the pandemic, obviously. We're seeing the pendulum swing back. There's a lot of people that are prominent that are very vocal about being in person, how important that is, especially for earlier stage companies. Gary Tan, who's a client of ours, he's pretty vocal about it. They don't require YC companies to be in office. Sam Altman, he's another client of ours. He very much is office centric. So, you know, it's all over the board. I think the pendulum is going to swing back. not nearly back to where it was. And that's part of where our workplace strategy team, who led internal workplace at like Pinterest, actually some of them spent time at Tesla back in the day. They can help companies and clients think through, okay, what is our strategy? Is it 3 days a week? Is it hybrid? Are we going, hubs in particular locations? What do we shape a real estate strategy around a hiring strategy? Only hire in certain hubs or in locales. It's really all over the place, and we can help companies think through a bespoke approach. You had a question?
Actually, I had the same question.
Okay.
So I'll change it up to with I don't know if you've seen all the a couple of the big office buildings being turned back to the lender.
Oh yeah, we can talk for days on that.
How will that affect you?
I think change in our business is opportunity. So there is a ton of opportunity for us to, I think, capture a lot of market share to, and this is where kind of market expertise, working with a really good partner who's sophisticated, who understands kind of the back end financial structures of these buildings, the GPs that own the building, their LPs, the debt on the assets, understanding that whole picture and, coming up with a leasing strategy and negotiation strategy to take advantage of that. There's a lot of buildings that are going to go back to the market. All that means for the business community, for you all, as you start companies and look for space, that's a great thing. I mean, the cost of doing business in San Francisco is going to go down dramatically. So that's awesome. And some of the more high profile buildings that are going to go back, they're still going to be good buildings. Like nothing is really changing. They're going to still operate through bankruptcy and through restructures. And some people are going to make a lot of money buying at really low bases.
I spoke to a startup, I want to say like about 3 years ago, that was building like an architect software platform that essentially enabled architects to build hospitals, because the idea is, like lighting in a waiting room really matters as it pertains to like patient health, or if if the nurse or doctor is able to see like all of their patients from one vantage point, that actually increases the life expectancy of the patients in the hospital. So I guess my question is, as you look to expand and maybe further, like if offices or maybe if office buildings are being recycled, like how do you see your technology scaling and like evolving to maybe different industries outside of the office space?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I mean, I think we want to essentially position ourselves to be a platform and a marketplace for all future space utilization technologies, to be kind of a hub and to help kind of distill whatever data, hardware that you all create, puts out, and kind of distill it in an easy to understand way on our platform. So I think like we're not closing ourselves off to any future possibilities. Like that's super interesting to us, but we haven't approached that specific idea.
I was recently introduced to the Asana Innovation Center. Do you know Asana? What do you guys call it, Asana? Is it project management software?
Yeah.
Like what's the category? They changed the name. But project management collaboration software. So they've created an innovation exploration hub in their building on Folsom, and they're doing all these studies about collaboration virtually, and they can map a whole company, all the individual nodes and teams, to see who's really collaborating. Like you'll see this cluster, and then you'll see these, they call them isolates, these people that never talk to anybody or send messages to anybody. And I'm really intrigued now with if there's a way to layer what you guys are doing with space utilization when people are in the office and this virtual collaboration. You guys should talk to them. And they got some really, really smart people doing research there, and that could be a great, synergistic combination.
Totally. Great idea.
Yeah, identify
The scientific takeaway: introverts don't talk to a lot of people. Anyone else? Yeah.
So recently I went to see the movie Oppenheimer.
Uh-huh.
And one of the brilliant aspects. Yeah.
Don't ruin it for me. I haven't seen it yet.
Well, one of Oppenheimer's brilliant aspects was his ability to partition the work geographically and the facilities and all that kind of stuff. It plays a big part in the movie. I was going to ask you what you thought of all that, but you haven't seen it, so maybe it's a spoiler.
But I think one thing that we do as a service provide our clients is we do a lot of labor analytics work, meaning helping clients think through where they hire for specific roles nationally or even internationally.
It's a big part of the movie. You should really see it.
Yeah.
The way he divides up the work is super important.
I'm stoked.
You work for Christopher Nolan?
It's a plug.
Yeah, so.
Nolan Pump.
Anyone else?
Yeah, assuming you're aggregating all this data, like what are some of the takeaways that you have thus far?
That's a good question. I mean, I think it's customer specific. You know, I think certain teams that I think management has a vision for how they would like some of their teams to operate, perform, and they're able to see. So, like, here's an example. Like, there will be company-wide edicts on return to office or how they want an organization to operate and come in. But what we have found is if the team leader, if the team leader doesn't model the desired behavior, the rest of the team will not go with whatever the top-down orders are. So, you know, that's one takeaway. You can kind of quickly see which team leaders are and which teams are you know, kind of going with the program or not. And like I said, we haven't gotten quite to the point of like density, like seeing what parts of space. That's the next iteration. But like the very simple you know, use case right now is, do we invest in an office when people aren't going? Like, we can quickly decipher, okay, our Mexico City team, they're barely using, and the team leader there is asking for more office space, and you can tell them, sorry dude, no way.
So your product seems mostly, like the customer base are tenants. Are there use cases or insights you think that landlords are going to be looking at this for?
Yeah, we have talked for a long time about entering kind of that side of the business. We do work for a few landlords, helping them lease out their space, but that's more on the commercial real estate side, less on like the software side. So there are some really interesting companies that are on kind of serving that side of the business, like VTS. I don't know if you've heard of them. They're based out of New York. Some of the other competitors. So we've talked about it a lot, but right now we're just hyper focused on optimizing and building for end users.
You mentioned detecting like presence detection. Like, do you know like what technologies like what technology like you guys, or you said Ripple maybe uses, and which one, like what are the different trade-offs between them?
Sorry, I missed the first part of your question.
You've mentioned I guess presence detection, like detecting how many people are in the office. Is that done using sensors, or is it just like using like key passes? That kind of thing?
So his question was presence detection, that being kind of a key focus of workplace analytics. Right now, it's just badge reader data. So Brevo, Envoy, whatever, tying that to Rippling so you can see which team and not just a raw, like how many people went in. Eventually, we will get to using APIs to tie in like other measurement tools of varying kinds.
And density would be kind of one of the more well-known sensors like that.
I have a question. I think increasingly, recently companies start to care about the carbon footprint of the building.
Yeah.
So energy efficiency of the office. So do you help tenants with that, or that's all on the landlords? How does that work? And what's your take on that?
Yeah, so the question was energy efficiency. If your client cares about it, can you help them find buildings that are energy efficient or LEED certified? The answer is yes. So we, as a part of kind of the commercial real estate side of the business, we know the market super well. We know which buildings have LEED certification, LEED Platinum, LEED Gold, certain Energy Star ratings. We include that information kind of in the building info section of the listings. So when we send you access to our platform and you're browsing through, you would be able to see that. And we would only curate listings if that was really important to you. We would only curate listings that met that criteria. As far as our thoughts on just ESG and commercial real estate, I would say right now it's super important to giant, Fortune 100 companies, but like startups are really focused on burn rate and getting a good deal and getting great space, and ESG doesn't really come into the equation too much, but I think it's going to grow over time, probably.
So it seems like a lot of what you guys are suggesting is companies get more efficient at how much they spend on real estate. And I was curious if you guys had any thoughts on, because a lot of the area you guys cover the problem is really building more things, not so much like distribution of these things. Do you have any ideas on how we can get more of these offices built ultimately, or is this more an exercise of matching things, equitably and at a good price for everyone? Do you guys have ideas on like macroeconomic solutions, I suppose?
So let me just restate your question, I think, what you're asking. So does our software lead to
increased investment, let's say, in building more office space?
Yeah, I don't think so. But I can speak to just a trend that isn't necessarily related to our software. What we're seeing is a massive flight to quality. So if there is any friction whatsoever for people to get to the office, they will not come in.
Could you explain what you mean by get to, like
transit? Yeah. So if it's hard to get to via transit, long drive, long commute, people won't come in. If it's in a dangerous neighborhood, there's homeless everywhere, it's dirty, people won't come in. If it is a old tired space that doesn't have natural light and has old finishes, people will not come in. And so people and organizations are making the conscious decision. They're saying, look, if we want space, we want people to come in, we need to invest in something that is quality, that removes all friction to get into the space. And we will, even in this market, spend a healthy amount of money on that, because if we don't, you might as well just not have an office. So that's just a trend we're noticing, and having that conversation with CEOs and founders a lot. All right, one last one. Someone come with a banger.
So are you doing, I think there's a lot of room for improvement with HVAC or something. Like, I'd love to see blowers that go on if the CO2 gets to a certain level or something. Is there any kind of innovation in that? Like, men and women are generally comfortable at different temperatures. Can we get personalized office heating or something like that?
Maybe little bubbles that we all walk around in. That's not our space, but one thing that's really exciting, being we're venture backed as well, Founders Fund and others, and seeing, I'm kind of a real estate nerd. I'm on real estate Twitter a lot, and there are a ton of new companies in this space. I can't speak to the exact examples, but there are all across the stack of, building infrastructure. There are people building new products, innovating, making things more efficient. So I'm confident that there's going to be a lot of innovation in the space over the years.
Michael Novik, obviously, a question, who are your nearest competitors and how are you better?
Yeah, so our nearest competitors are like big publicly traded multinational firms, Cushman & Wakefield, where I used to work, CBRE, JLL, Colliers. You probably see their signs on buildings all around. These companies they're good companies. I mean, I tell people that we interview and we're competing in pitches with, there are great brokers at all those firms. I came from C&W, as I mentioned. They are huge organizations. They have 40,000 people. Of that, 10,000 are probably brokers, another 10,000 are property managers, another 10,000 are janitors. At the end of the day, we're purpose built around scaling companies and companies who need office space. We don't have any of the frills. We don't have janitors on staff. We don't have property managers. We don't have all this fluff. We've took everything that was great at those firms, research, subject matter experts, top brokers, the best project managers in the field. We put them and built, everything. All of our people are integrated. Things are very siloed at the big shops. You have an idea. It's like trying to move an aircraft carrier when you're swimming. It's impossible. There is no innovation, especially not from the ground up. So that's literally the opposite of us. We're sprinting. Our clients have an idea. We make the change with our engineering team. We deliver that change in product ASAP. So, I would think that just philosophically how we are is super different. And truly, you won't really understand the difference in experience unless you just look for space, and you would know. And then I could just show you a demo of our platform. It is night and day. It's crazy. Like the platform makes it faster. This is so simple to say, but we have more photos of all the spaces than our competitors, because anytime one of our brokers is in the space, we're snapping photos, we're uploading to the platform for that particular listing, and then all of our clients get the benefit of those photos. Why does that matter? We're not wasting clients' time going and looking at spaces that they would never tour if they simply had a few more photos to just check out the space. So it's a much richer experience, and we brought all the good parts of those big firms, and we have them.
Cool. Thank you, guys.
Awesome. Thanks.
And on that note on HVAC, there's tons of companies that are working on like personalized HVAC. My team at Informal and I worked at one that was just piloted at Google's campus in Mountain View, where it personalizes, airflow to individuals at a given desk. Tons of stuff happening there. It's a really exciting space. But only Google can afford it, so there you go. Okay, so I don't think we have additional slides for this, but we always like to end these events with a little community open mic where anyone in attendance can get up on the mic to make an announcement. If you're hiring, if you're looking for a job, if you're launching a Kickstarter campaign, this can be your opportunity. We'll just have you line up on this ramp here. Noel, can we move that mic out of the way just so that people can do that? And then one at a time, you can get up on the mic and make your announcement. So feel free to start lining up. Go to our very first slide.
So fun.
All right, come on up.
Okay. All right, hello everybody. My name is Brett Yoakum, and my ask is that I'm looking for tech founders to take a survey as part of my PhD dissertation research. So I'm trying to do a study that looks for a link between pivoting frequency and founder personality. My PhD is going to be in business psychology. I need 164 founders to take my survey before I can begin data analysis. I have 76 surveys completed, so I'm coming to these events to look for founders that have taken their startup past the discovery stage, because I don't want discovery pivots, that's too much noise, but once you've validated, and then you can count your pivots after that. I'd love to meet with you and share with you my survey. It only takes 15 minutes. And it's all part of the effort that we're all involved in, which is trying to reduce startup failure. Previous studies have shown there's a link, a correlation between pivoting frequency and the potential for success or failure. A really big study showed that startups that pivot 0 times or 3 or more times are more likely to fail than the ones that pivoted only once or twice, which made me think maybe there's a sweet spot. Could it be related to the psychology of founders? So come see me. I'd love to share my survey with you, and of course I'll share my results when I finally get all my surveys done. Thank you.
If I was a founder, I would do it.
All right.
Hey everyone, just want to say awesome event, Nate. Great speakers, seriously, that was a super nice event. Nice job, everyone. My name's Kyle, I'm from Port Labs, also a member of the Hardware Collective. Just wanted to make sure anyone here who's aware, in addition to having space and being a part of this event ecosystem, we do offer free support to early stage founders, completely free. If you're a taxpayer in California, it's free to you. We had 2 companies successfully get their first angel round this week. It was a really good week. So it is working, and I want to just spread the word. Please come out. We have some great coaches, some of which are in the audience. But anyway, I just want to let you know. Thanks so much.
Hello everybody, my name is Vazgen. I'm co-founder of Wimble AI. We built a platform, it's AI-powered procurement platform. We help hardware startups to purchase parts and components at lower prices. So we will source suppliers, push them to offer better prices, and so your spend will go down with us. If you're purchasing a lot of parts or components, please reach me out. I'll be around. Thank you. Bye.
Come on out.
Hey, I'm Yasha. I'm a consultant. I'm also an advisor at Herb Machine. I just wanted to give a shout out. We are planning, myself and Michael, who's somewhere around here, we're planning a hackathon in a couple months. The theme is going to be AI in motion. So we're really looking to bring people from both AI, the AI side, software people that haven't touched much hardware, and robotics people that are a little AI curious, bring those two communities together and actually move the world with these systems. We're hoping to do kind of like a theme concerning the indoor and I guess what we would call the built environment. So like, can you teach a Roomba to put your office chair back autonomously with like just a text prompt might be a good one. If that's something you'd be interested in, please come talk to me because we're trying to plan it and build out the infrastructure. Thank you.
All right, this is a little frightening because my first ever meetup. But hi everyone, my name is Piram, and Michael is currently running like a 2-week climate tech program, and that's for college students. So I'm currently gonna be a super senior basically at San Jose State. And what my team is doing is we're looking at CO2 valorization into different products. So we're currently in the research stage right now. We're looking at turning CO2 into carbon fiber, graphene, carbon black. So I don't know a lot about carbon capture, but my partner does. So if you have any contacts or someone we can jam about carbon capture with, I think that'd be super helpful for us and our team. So that's my shortest spiel. So thank you.
Noel, you want to come up? So Noel's going to give a thing about his boom boxes, which are really cool, but he also did the live stream and the video recording for us tonight, so give Noel a round of applause for that.
Thanks, Nate. Thanks, everybody. And thanks to Yan, who is my colleague on the video team. Everyone, Yan has been doing an amazing job, too, so thank you. This is Make Boomboxes, and if there's any way to pull up the website, it's makeboomboxes.com. If you can guess what we do, we make boomboxes. It's a beautiful, bespoke experience of music, and if you're really into music, if you're a musician, if you're an engineer, if you're a builder, if you care about the artistry and the joy of your experience and the devices through which you play your music, you want it to be elevated to the level of song and the level of spirit that goes into the creation of music. That's what I've been chasing after. So hopefully, if you are that kind of person and that kind of interest, come talk with me. It is a do-it-yourself kit as well. If you feel like, showing up at the party and people are like, what the F is that? And, did you make that? Yeah, shit, yeah. That's kind of, the best thing about it. And that's kind of, I've spent the last year turning it into a DIY kit and all the documentation, 80 pages of detailed 3D models of every turn of every screw, and you really can't mess up the build. The next phase is video. That's how I got into this video side hustle to the side hustle. And if you want video production done, come talk to me. I don't have a website yet for it, but when I do, it'll be noel.video. Thank you very much.
Hi everyone, my name is Amy Figueiredo. Totally impromptu to speak up here, but I just decided to go for it. I came tonight because I have been working in climate tech for over 15 years. Most recently, for the last 10 years, in the built environment, trying to reduce the carbon footprint of commercial real estate, so the Ray's presentation was interesting for that. But I am right now considering founding my own company in residential electrification. So if any of you have thoughts as founders who want to convince me to take the plunge, please come convince me or tell me not to. Or if you have thoughts about residential electrification and the challenges that I might encounter in that path, I would love to hear from you. Thank you.
Hi everyone, I'm Viola. I'm a high school student, and right now I'm building different projects with next-gen batteries and simulations and looking into how can we use AI to basically test batteries, which is really exciting for me. And I would love if you guys could connect me with people working in that space. And also, right now I'm kind of working on sort of building batteries and simulations independently. So if you know any companies or are part of companies who are looking for interns who would be interested in like having high schoolers come like me to help build battery systems and stuff like that, it would be really great if you could connect me. Thank you.
I think you need to talk to her, Miranda. Who else? Come on up.
Hi guys, my name is Sierra. I'm working with a software company called Elu, and we help hardware companies and hardware providers figure out how to actually deploy their products well and smooth out the install and servicing process. So if you're working for a hardware company, we're mostly in solar and storage at the moment, but exploring EV charging and built environment, HVAC electrification. So if you're working for a hardware company and struggling with kind of subcontractors and house teams, and installers, and managing that process, I'd love to help. I'd love to just chat through what that process has been like. Very much kind of deploy, and get that out. Thanks.
Anybody else? No? I'll just say Studio 45 is doing an end of the summer membership promotion. Membership's going to be available for 3 months for 30% off. Talk to me if you want to know about pricing, and I'll be doing tours after this. So come find me afterwards and I'll show you around the space. But until then, thank you all for coming. This was really, really fun. There's tons of pizza in the back. Please go eat that. There's lots of beer. Mix, mingle, meet someone you've never met before, and have a great night. Thank you for coming.